Welcome, everybody. Derek Rydall here, founder of the Law of Emergence and author of the best-selling books, Emergence and the Abundance Project. And I'm trying some different things here, Zooming, Facebook Live, Zoom here, but so there's a little bit of a delay. But I want to start a new series of conversations or talks around matter versus what matters. And it's really a journey into an ever deeper understanding of the nature of reality. And not merely as an intellectual or metaphysical or mystical pursuit, although that is an important piece, I believe. The development of our maps of reality is very, very critical because our map of reality determines what we're moving around in, just like a map you have of your city, or it determines whether you're going to find the destination you're trying to get to, or if you're going to get lost. If you have a map of New York and you're trying to get around LA, you're going to have some serious problems, as you can imagine. You're going to be lost, you're going to be frustrated, you're not going to actually get where you want to go. And you're going to end up running out of gas or whatever and ending up on the side of the road. So the map of reality that we hold is critical. And it also tends to formulate our identity. We develop an identity early on, and based on us mapping out reality and experiencing how reality responds to us, i.e. our parents, our siblings, our teachers, etc. Based on that, we determine who I am and we determine what the world is. And then we develop coping mechanisms, protective mechanisms, defensive mechanisms, etc. in order to survive. Right? So we go through life then living in that map and mostly trying to be the person we think we need to be to survive or thrive within that map. So at some point, we need to challenge that map. And if we don't challenge it personally and consciously, it tends to get challenged through crisis and even tragedy. And if we are willing to do it consciously, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy necessarily, but we have the opportunity to preempt some of the crisis, some of the stagnation, lack, and limitation. And we have a chance to grow and develop and evolve in a progressive and continuous way. And rather than living the same year, as I like to say, most people don't live 70 to 90 years. They live the same year 70 to 90 times. And so we want to live a new year every new year, but we have to be a new individual. We have to have a newer, deeper, richer, or more expanded understanding of reality and ultimately of ourself, our identity. New you, new year. Not a new you, it's not going to be a new year. It's going to just be a regurgitation of the previous year or years. And the only change there will be is a tendency to go downward, to stagnate, and to then have to create more coping and compulsive mechanisms to survive. Okay, so I want to start off this series with matter versus matter, the idea that science is an incomplete model of reality. And I want to be very clear, science is awesome. Science is great. Science is necessary. When we moved from where we were in a somewhat childlike and even childish awareness of reality, making up stories about reality, giving personalities to the sun and the moon and the stars and all the ways we tried to understand reality, although a lot of that was beautiful and necessary, the Enlightenment period allowed us to begin to become more rational, to develop our mind and our intellect and our ability to discern how things work, and no longer believe that all the power was outside of us. We'd walk into these grand cathedrals and we would, the great God, and we would always feel small by comparison. And the Enlightenment period brought it down to us and said, no, the power is in you, your mind, your intellect, your personal development. You as a human being have great capacity. And so we began to learn to develop our skills and abilities, and the sciences and many of the things evolved out of that and progressed out of that. The problem is, in the process of that, which we do tend to do, maybe it's just me, but I think it's humanity, we tend to swing from one side to the other. We tend to polarize into extremes. And in this series, we'll talk more and more about the danger of polarization, and ultimately the opportunity of greater integration. But we swung very hard to, especially in the West, a much more rationalistic, materialistic, scientific way of seeing things. Now, the great blessing of that is we've learned to, do all kinds of things by understanding the nature and the principles of matter. We're doing this right now. You wouldn't be able to watch me over this video if we did not have science, if we did not have the ability to understand principles of matter and engineer them into things that are practical and that are usable and that are useful and that extend our reach and allow us to feed people where we couldn't before, allow us to communicate in ways and in places we couldn't before, allows great efficiencies and economies of scale and all of these good things, potentially very good things. I shouldn't say they're good things. They're just what they are. And they are tools and strategies. But we can also notice that the great promise of technology, although it has tended to increase our abundance and raise people out of poverty into middle class, it hasn't necessarily fulfilled any promise of more happiness or greater freedom or greater peace or greater love or connection and to humanity. It hasn't really been technology that's decreased man's inhumanity to man to whatever extent that it has been decreased. So science has allowed us to split the atom and to understand the atomic structures of things and help with some elements of medical progress and healing and prevent a lot of disease and poverty and things that used to be the bane of human existence. And that's wonderful. So I want to be very clear. I'm not anti-science. I'm very much pro-science. However, it's not a complete model of reality. Just like merely seeing, if you're a hammer, everything is a nail, right? And if you're a scientist, or you think only scientific, rational, what can be measured is the only thing that's real, then everything is a number. Everything is a measurement, or it doesn't exist at all. There's a cognitive dissonance. There's a profound bias, and I will even go so far as to say there's a materialistic dogma that nothing exists unless it's measurable, right? Because it says it only allows that for that which is measurable in formulating a model or a picture of possible reality, ultimately. Now, some scientists or rationalists might argue with this, but it is fundamental to it. And that's good, because if you're dealing in the realm of what's measurable, i.e., how to use atoms to create things that are practical and that are predictable and that work, you need to measure it, and you need to measure twice and cut once. And you need to understand the mechanics of physics and all of that, and even quantum physics for some of the more higher level technologies. So there's nothing wrong with measuring. Again, I want to be clear. Measuring is good where measuring is possible. And science is great where measuring is necessary. But again, it creates a worldview and a model of reality that says if you cannot measure it, it does not exist, at least not now. Maybe we'll discover it in the future, but it doesn't exist now, and it's not practical now, and it doesn't matter unless it's matter, unless it's measurable. And because it only measures that which is measurable, then that which is immeasurable can never be a part of a scientific model of reality. And therefore, it can never be a part of reality according to any scientific or materialistic views, which again, most Western views are based on that. And whereas more Eastern views are not as based on that, although it's creeping into the Eastern views. Now, the problem with the East is it has historically been more about that which is not visible. And as a result, it lacks or has lacked in some of the structures of progress. We don't see as much innovation in technology. There's greater poverty, et cetera, physically and materially speaking. Whereas in the West, there's greater poverty spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, you could say. So there's the yin and yang there, right? There's the masculine and the feminine. The masculine being the structures and the order, and science being primarily a masculine-driven model of reality, and the Eastern philosophies being more of a feminine-driven model of reality, although there's some masculine there in terms of discipline and those kind of structures. But again, most of reality, or at least most of what makes life worth living, and this is a sort of a prima facie, on the surface, irrefutable fact. Most of what makes life worth living is that which is not measurable, not by traditional science anyway. So most of what makes life worth living, most of what makes life fulfilling, is subjective, not objective. Okay? And therefore, most of reality is immeasurable. Most of what really matters is not matter. And we know this because there's many, many examples of people, perhaps you, that have gotten the thing they thought they wanted, the material situation, the relationship, the job, the money, the stuff, and had lots of it, and you were not happy. Or maybe you got rid of some stuff and you were ultimately not happy. Or maybe you got more free time and you were ultimately not happy. Or maybe you got more busy and you were all, in other words, no rearranging of atoms, mentally, emotionally, or physically, in terms of the world that can be measured. We have no evidence that that leads to any of the things that we truly strive for as human beings. It doesn't lead to a deeper sense of love, a deeper sense of joy, a deeper sense of peace, a deeper sense of well-being, a deeper sense of purpose or meaning or inspiration. Now, it can help, especially at the lower levels, to stabilize the structures of matter is very important. But we've seen even through scientific studies that after a certain income level, and it's a very low level, I think in the United States, it's somewhere between 50, maybe up to 75,000, maybe not even that much. But after that, there is no marked increase in any of these key markers: joy, peace, well-being, stress. In fact, in many cases, there's an increase in stress and a decrease in happiness. The more material stuff we have, the more technology we have. All of this technology, do you have more time in your life? Do you have more freedom? Do you feel greater ease and peace and joy and happiness because you have 15 social media platforms you can now be totally distracted by? Because you have an iPhone that's pretty much attached to your brain? Are you finding tremendously more of what really matters in your life? Or has it actually increased stress, decreased self-worth and self-esteem, decreased real creativity and connection? You see what I mean? So there's actually an inverse corollary. The more we focus on matter, the less of what really matters do we actually have an experience. And again, I'm not making matter wrong. I'm just simply saying that which is measurable, that which is material, that which is most scientific and rational thinking, materialistic thinking is based on, is a very finite and very small piece of what makes up reality. And yet it is predominantly how we think of reality. And maybe not you, people here, but then I hope you'll pass this on to your materialistic friends and scientific friends or atheists or whatever who believe only what can be seen, touched, tasted, and measured is what's real, because we can enter into a new conversation and a dialogue with some pretty self-evident facts, such as no matter how much science we've had, no matter how much improvements in technology we've had, it has its limits, and it's very, very limited in terms of what actual meaning, in terms of what matters, how much it increases what matters in our life. And so that means that, and even from a scientific standpoint, we know that the atom, the basic building block of material reality, is mostly empty. 99.99 or 999% empty, invisible. 0.0009%, give or take, is all that is visible or measurable. And as they've split the atom and the subatomic particles and particle accelerators, what they're getting down to is fundamentally non-material stuff, right? That which is the building block of matter is immaterial. That which is the building block of what can be measured is actually immeasurable. Now, again, this is self-evident, but there's a tremendous bias and blind spot in the scientific community, and by extension, the technological community, and by extension, many of our institutions, and therefore many of our systemic belief systems. And even if you're a spiritually minded, heart-centered person, you're infiltrated by this virus of materialism. And if you do not take a proper and consistent amount of time really getting to know yourself and really getting to know the nature of reality, you're going to be impinged by this belief system and constantly hypnotized by this idea that reality is fundamentally material. Now, there's the other side of this, which is if you've gone very far and rejected the world of matter, the feminine rejecting the masculine, whether you're a man or a woman, because of the destructive nature of it, the aggressive nature of it, the problematic nature of it, you have a similar problem. And you probably can't balance your checkbook. You probably struggle with money. You probably have a hard time starting or finishing things. There's a real lack of the left brain or the masculine or the order and the structure in your life. And really a lack of mastery over matter. And it's incredibly important and absolutely necessary that we master matter. But it's equally important and necessary. And I will even say for the ongoing evolution of our species, the most important, that we have a deeper understanding and mastery over what matters. Matter and what matters. And then we go to the basic scientific dogma, which is that what matters, or consciousness, our conscious awareness, our sense of subjectivity, our sense of beingness, is an emergent property of matter, that what matters comes from matter. And this is not a new argument, but I have to say, and I want to make the case that it's absolutely false. And again, we can look and see that if what matters is what matters most, then what matters must be way more fundamental to our nature than matter. And if all of this matter is built on atoms that are made of that which is immaterial, fundamentally speaking, then what is material and what is visible must be emergent or emerging from that which is invisible or immaterial. If there was apparently nothing, and then suddenly in a big bang there was everything, there must fundamentally be an underlying reality of nothingness or no thingness out of which everything arises. These to me seem to be self-evident, but you cannot begin to plumb the depths and question reality and have an intuitive realization of the nature of that which is immeasurable if you've been indoctrinated into and are hypnotized into the belief that only that which you can see, touch, taste, and measure is what is real. So, and why is this important? Because if it's true, and this is my belief, and this is my premise and the way I live, if it's true that all of matter emerges from a deeper substrate of what matters, or all of material reality emerges out of an invisible or immeasurable reality, you don't have to call it God. You can just say whatever it is, it is. It's something infinite and eternal because it's not in time. Time is an unfoldment or a function or a dimension of it. And so that means it always is. It has no beginning, middle, and end. It's not in space. Space is a canvas upon which it emerges onto or expresses in. It creates space and time, which science will say there was a moment before space and time, and then there's space and time. So it's not in space or time. So it's infinite and it's eternal and it's immeasurable because it contains all potential measurements, i.e., infinite. And as you begin to acknowledge the real possibility that there is an infinite, immeasurable, immaterial something or isness out of which everything is emerging, you start to now look around and see, well, that's kind of what's happening everywhere with seeds. Everywhere there's a seed. Everything that appears came from a seed. You came from a seed, the tree came from a seed, the flower came from a seed, the fruit came from a seed, the chicken came from a seed. Everything comes from a seed. And so you have to say, well, therefore that is a manifestation of a much larger and immeasurable reality that out of which everything is coming, a grand seed, a grand idea. And you start to see there really is an order underneath all of this, that the life isn't just happening randomly, that atoms don't smash together randomly and naturally create greater and greater complexity. And that there is something fundamental to reality and to us. And why this is so important, and we'll go deeper into this as we go through this series, I think, is because as long as you believe matter is what matters, instead of being more tapped into what really matters, the love, the peace, the joy, the beauty, the purpose, the meaning, the connection, that which can't really be measured. You can't measure it by appearances, right? You can kiss somebody and be betraying them, the Judas kiss, or you can just be sitting there with no expression and be in bliss. You can't measure it. Not really. It's subjective. It's not objective. There is no objective truth. Truth is, by definition, infinite. And so you can play with relative truth and you can move the atoms around and you can do some really good things. But if you are a slave to that, if you believe that's all there is, when those atoms don't look good, when things, the conditions you're facing are very, very difficult, and based on all measurements, you have no money. Based on all measurements, your body is sick or you have a disease that's fatal. Based on all measurements, you live in a country or culture where you can never amount to much. Based on all measurements, you come from a family where there's no way you could amount to, you see what I mean? If it's based on matter only, then there is no hope. There's no hope for the vast majority of people who are starting with measurements that are utterly hopeless, or who have suddenly moved into an experience of measurements that are hopeless, such as great tragedies and crises and death and disease and loss. If it's just about numbers, there's no hope. But if it's just about what you can see, touch, taste, or measure, but yet we have the world is populated with the stories we love the most are where an individual seems to rise up and gain access to a resourcefulness, resourceful, to be full of source again. They tap into something that is deeper than what can be measured, that is deeper than numbers, that is beyond the Western bottom line. They tap into something beyond what medical science can understand, beyond what technology can provide, beyond what science can begin to comprehend. There's no scientific, technological, reasonable, or medical possibility for that individual to suddenly have the money they need or the resources they need or the gifts, talents, and abilities or the wisdom or the insight or the inspiration or the healing. And yet, again and again and again, we do that. We tap into something beyond what is measurable. We tap into the immeasurable. We step out of the simulation of the mind, the storyline, that which can be seen, touched, tasted, and sensed with the physical senses, into something beyond that, the soul senses. Instead of imagination, we go to an emergination, to something much deeper or purer or truer, something that is not conditioned or conditional based on what's measurable. And again, there isn't a single scientist that can refute this. They will try to say, well, there's some scientific explanation, we just haven't found it yet. And I will agree that there's an explanation, but I won't agree that it's necessarily going to be found through our current scientific model, because we can only measure that to which we've evolved with our instrumentality. But there's a lot of other forms of understanding and contacting reality than just a telescope or a microscope or a measuring stick. There's philosophy, there's art, there's music, there's poetry, there's relationship, there's meditation and self-contemplation. These are tools of a kind of science that existed before our traditional science. And I will even say we're the foundation for it. And some of the greatest scientists, like an Einstein, were more of a poet than just a scientist. He wasn't even a brilliant mathematician. He did thought experiments. He tapped into that which was not known and that what was not measurable, and then brought forth measurements to support it and replicate it to some extent. But the greatest mystics of ages, the greatest poets of the ages, that across time and across cultures are all fundamentally saying the same things, is as much a body of real knowledge, even if you cannot measure it with scientific tools and you cannot use it to create a better iPhone. Because that's not what it's for. It's not the part of reality meant to create a better iPhone. It's the part of reality meant to create a better life, a better connection with life, more fulfillment, more meaning, more purpose, more joy, more love, all of what matters. So we have to have a map of reality and tools and strategies for approaching it and apprehending it that include both that which can connect with what matters and that which can measure and manipulate matter together. If it's not both of those, it's a woefully incomplete model. And we are doomed to create technologies that destroy us, either mentally, emotionally, or physically. Or if we eschew all of matter, we're doomed to create Pollyanna-ish, utopian, conspiracy theory, conspirituality, and all this stuff that likewise destroys us. So that's what this, hopefully that's interesting and it's thought-provocative, thought-provoking, and it's stimulating a sense of like, there's a bigger way to be with life and reality. And fundamentally, at least my focus for this series is that it starts with that the foundation of it is not how well you can manipulate matter, but how much you can contact and connect with what really matters. That's the foundation. All of evolution is built on what came before. Material science did not come out of material science. It came out of metaphysics and mysticism and philosophy and art and poetry. It emerged as another layer on top of that foundation. And my hope is through this process of contemplation and this series, you'll develop an even deeper and deeper connection with the foundation of your life, with what really matters, upon which you can build a better life of matter, of material expression, of abundance, and all of those good things. And I can tell you now more than ever, we need to get back to first principles, because we are being surrounded by memes and temptations and conspiracies and the crumbling of many structures over the last year or so. And this is an ongoing process. And if we're hooked into matter, into appearances merely, looking for truth out there, we're going to be lost. Worse than lost, we're going to go down with the crumbling structures. But if we can tap into the only place we'll ever find the truth, which is within us, and learn how to self-reflect and become more self-aware, and to really have a foundation of truth inside of us that is not of the world of matter, but is that which matter arises from, that's where we begin to have real security, a real sense of well-being and peace, a real sense of power and possibility in a world constantly changing. So that's my hope for you. None of this is merely theoretical. This is how I live and move every day. And I've been through terrible tragedies this last year. And so I'm speaking from a deep place of practice. And I want to invite you to let this series be in a way that you increase your practice. And there'll be much more to come. I've already talked way too long, or way more than I expected. Comment below. Let me know what you think. If you want more, go check my work out on YouTube. Look under Derek Rydall. Go check out the podcast Emergence. I'm on iTunes and in other places you find podcasts. You can also just go to DerekRydall.com and check out all the free trainings there, and just continue to get what you need to be supported. And until next time, remember to live authentically, love unconditionally, and follow your destiny. Take care.